GT race is a 4-hour event. The track conditions are wet, but it's drying fast, and tyre choice could be critical. On the front row, the McLarens of Britain's Andy Wallace and Ray Belm. Way back in 27th spot is championship leader Thomas Bichère, who partners John Nielsen. At the start, some chose slicks, others wets, while John Nielsen went for intermediates, determined to make up for the practice accident in the wet that stopped him taking advantage of the few minutes when the track was dry. Andy Wallace had been luckier.
Tiff, there's no luck involved, mate. I waited in the pits, the track was a little bit damp, I had the Goodyears bolted on there, the right pressures, and then they said, right, now's the time. So I left, I did one lap, got pole position. You can call it what you like. I enjoyed the lap. It wasn't particularly clear, and I did actually flat spot both tyres coming into the complex. It was a lot of fun, and it was quick enough.
Under rain-filled clouds, the grid pulled away on the green flag lap, with even Le Mans winner Wallace concerned about the effects of another downpour.
If it's really wet, obviously the spray is a big problem. And you come up on a slow car, you see a ball of spray, so you move to the right or the left of that spray, thinking that that's where the track is clear. Well, his friend might be on the left or the right, going even slower than he is. So you have to be very careful. I think the race will be wet, dry throughout, which means I think the pit crews will win or lose this race.
Today's a really difficult day because rain is not my scene at all. And this new circuit that they've made here at Silverstone, all the new parts of the circuit hold the water, so it's extremely slippery with 600 horsepower, small tyres and no downforce.
I'm starting, I'm in front, and those people behind will get all the spray.
As the pace car pulled off for the rolling start, Andy was true to his word, leading from the outside pole position. Ray Belm had nominated teammate Maurizio Sandro Sala to start in the Gulf McLaren, and he duly slotted into second. Behind them, variety was the spice of life, with Eugene O'Brien's Corvette jumping ahead of Core Oizer's Marcos, the Porsches of Enzo Calderari and Thomas Saldana, then the Jaguar of Peter Hardman and the Lotus of Alessandro Zanardi right behind them. Like Nielsen, Wallace was on intermediates, and already it looked the right choice as Sala fell back on his wet rubber just ahead of the GT3 class battle led by the Corvette, the Marcos and the Porsche of Calderari, who is partnered by the only lady in the race, Lilian Brunner.
Well, the tactic, we hope it will dry out because of the tyre problems we have on the wet, and so it will be an aggressive tactic though, because the competition is very high and we can't, do too slow.
Also challenging for Class 3 honours and hopefully a top overall finish was the Works Lotus Esprit of Grand Prix star Zanardi.
Well, Zanardi is tremendous, that's quite true, and he's really lovely and he revels in the wet conditions, that's true. Yes, but there's some good drivers around as well. If it rains, we should be pretty well up there, if it rains consistently. Otherwise, I think we might be pretty well. We're unfortunately well back on the grid. We have to go past about 4 or 5 of the other cars in our class, but I don't think that's going to be a problem for Alessandro.
Making up ground fast on the first lap, John Nielsen had been confident that he could maintain his championship lead over Ray Belm's similar McLaren.
We have a cushion at the moment, and certainly we don't want to give up on it, and if we can score points every time, Mr. Ray Belm will have a problem to pick us up, and hopefully we can win it.
On the drying track, he was soon up to 4th, ahead of a squabbling trio of GT3 cars. Oizer's yellow Marcos muscled past O'Brien in the Callaway Corvette around Stowe Corner, but Zanardi and the Lotus gobbled them both into the tight left-hander at Club. Who said endurance racing was dull? But in the first quarter of an hour, all 3 would be into the pits for slick tyres, a necessity impressed upon Sandro Sala as his championship rival John Nielsen dived past at Stowe to take 2nd place. Andy Wallace was right when he said pit work could win or lose a race. In the Karsha series, you can't change wheels and refuel at the same time, and pit crews are limited in number, so fast, reliable work is essential. Gaining a 2nd on the track is much harder than losing a 2nd in the pits. For Hugh Chamberlain, the challenge was getting his sole Jaguar XJ220 to outperform the 4 nimble McLarens.
I'm not convinced anybody could take around McLaren's around all the twisty circuits, but I think everybody's there to be beaten. It's very difficult. They've got a very, very strong package, you all know that. But we do have turbo engines, and we can theoretically get more horsepower than they do. All we've got to do is make it go around corners.
The Jaguar was planning to play tortoise to the McLaren Hares, and on lap 10 there was good reason to hope the theory might work when John Nielsen dumped his in the sandpit. Theoretically, that should have been curtains, but the marshals reckoned he was in a dangerous spot and dragged him out. Having lost 2 laps, but with no obvious damage done, the stage was set for an epic chase after the Harrods car at the head of the field. Andy Wallace was secure in the lead, but the weather threatened, and after another 8 laps, he pitted to change to wets. That left Anders Olofsson in the red Ferrari F40 in the lead, but unable to stop Sala unlapping himself, having pitted early to change from wets to slicks. When Olofsson stopped for fuel and wet tyres, Enzo Calderari in the GT3 Porsche was leading the race, at least until he needed to change his intermediate rubber for full wets. "75 minutes gone and the weather could hardly be worse. Andy Wallace, back in the lead, was blinded by the spray from the second Gulf McLaren driven by Pierre-Henri Raffanel. Even the professional drivers were finding the conditions virtually impossible, controlling 600 horsepower on a flooded track, aware that this racing version of the F1 McLaren costs a cool £750,000. People were already suggesting the use of a safety car, but it took Christian Heinkel to prove how bad it was by reshaping his Ferrari 355 against the barriers, and then they brought it out, picking up the leader in the Harrods McLaren while everyone else bunched up behind. But the conditions weren't worrying Hugh Chamberlain, whose Jaguar had problems of its own.
The engine stopped, pure and simple. It was unfortunately not something simple like a electronic gubbins and a bit of water in there. It just, there's something big gone inside the engine, so I think you know about that.
It wasn't the only British retirement. The Morgan was out with a broken front upright, and Cor Oiser's Marcos picked up body damage and a puncture, having run into a Ferrari F40.
I don't blame the F40 because I absolutely haven't seen me, but you have to be so careful. But
And how about the puddles? How about aquaplaning?
well, it's all over the place, so it's pretty fun out there.
Also having fun in his Lotus was Zanardi, who was delighting his pit crew with his progress. You wanted the rain. Is this wet enough for you?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, we're making up lots of places now. Unfortunately, we made the wrong tyre choice at the beginning, so we're back at about 6th place, but we're slowly picking people off and hoping to get further up.
At about the same time, the second Marcos hit trouble, but Jem Marsh was as cheerful as ever.
We're doing very well, actually. We're well on the pace. Unfortunately, just the belt's broken driving the water pump, so the drivers come in, we're changing that quickly, and off we go again. The car's going very well. We're quite happy.
With the rain easing, supposedly, the pace car pulled over and the race was on again. Not that Andy Wallace could go a lot quicker. In fact, the less powerful Porsches with their narrower tyres were better at cutting through the puddles. In the dry, Andy lapped at an average speed of just over 100 miles an hour. Now he was racing at 75 miles an hour, unable to hold back Enzo Calderari in the GT3 Porsche, who swept back into the lead as the race neared the halfway mark. Time for a driver change in the Lotus and a break for the rainmaster Alessandro Zanardi, who'd worked his way up to 4th.
The car was just flying around the corners. The only problem is that, you know, to overtake somebody I have to take a lot of risk because I can't do it in the straight line. So I had to do it in the corner, and sometimes I hit somebody which was not, even with the blue flag, was just turning for the corner. I don't know, we'll see. As Alex Portman took the Lotus back on the track, now down to 9th spot, Enzo Calderari's Porsche still led the Harrods McLaren, but they were approaching the maximum length for a single driving stint. With their two-way radio not working, Lillian Brinner had to signal desperately for her teammate to stop.
Ex-Grand Prix driver Olivier Griard was calmer, waiting for teammate Andy Wallace to come in. The Dave Price team's pit work was as slick and efficient as usual, and the lead car would soon be back on its way, leaving Andy to talk tyres with his engineer.
They're great, and then they started to understeer. The left front was worn out.
Everything else all right?
Fine.
Right.
Absolutely fine now. Now you take the tape off. Yeah. That car was brilliant, just the water. Oh.
Andy, do you like being a racing driver?
I absolutely love it. It's great, but those conditions out there were very, very treacherous. I mean, with our car, you've only got to lift the throttle just a teeny weeny bit, and the rear wheel's locked because of the compression. So you have to be in a high gear and just coming past the start-finish line. I mean, anybody can drive down the start-finish line, but no, it's bucking and weaving and jumping with no throttle on. So I'd say to actually get it back to the pit is an achievement, and I'm very happy about that.
How do you explain to Joe Public when a £50,000 Porsche 911 goes past a £500,000 McLaren F1?
Well, you do it like this. When it dries out a bit, you'll see the car go flying by. We've got much bigger tyres and we aquaplane more.
With the bits between his teeth, Olivier fulfilled Andy's prediction after 2 3/4 hours. Lillian had eventually taken over from Enzo, but on the drying track, she had no answer to the McLaren's power. Just 1 hour to go now, and Olivier Griard is pulling away at the front in the Harrods McLaren. Just one more stop for fuel, maybe some slick tyres as the track is drying out. Second place, still the amazing Porsche of Lillian Brunner, but it looks like they may have a stop-go penalty because Enzo Calderari drove for too long, which means up into second place comes the little Lotus. Sure enough, Lillian was black flagged and had to stop for the 6 minutes that Enzo had overstayed his time on the track. He explained the penalty to a distraught Lillian, contemplating a drop from a brilliant second to a forgettable 12th. In the championship battle between the #1 Gulf car and the other Dave Price car, Belm and Sala were up to 6th with half an hour to go when this problem with a loose rear wheel dropped them back to a finish place of 9th. That let their rivals John Nielsen and Thomas Bichère through to finish 5th and increase their points lead. Ray rejoined the race, careful not to exceed the pit lane speed limit of just 30 miles an hour. In the Dave Price pit, anxious signals to Olivier Griard, who had done so and would need to stop for 10 seconds. With the penalty complete, Lillian handed the car back to Enzo and reflected on their misfortune.
It was pity because the race really did very well and we did all both well and we could have won this race.
On a virtually dry track, the leader was about to lap the Lotus, now in 3rd place, having been unable to defend its position from the French Ferrari F40 driven by Olivier Thévenin. With Griard yet to take his stop-go penalty, teammate Michel Ferté hadn't given up all hopes of victory, but there was one small problem.
Now we run with wet tire, and the car is little bit too slow, but I think it's enough for to go for the end of the race.
In fact, as the Harrods car reeled off the final laps, they were lucky to hold on to 2nd as a charging Olofsson grabbed 3rd from the class-winning Lotus. But there would be no depriving Andy Wallace, Olivier Griard and the Dave Price crew of their first win for the Harrods car that had come so close to victory at Le Mans. Andy, does that make up a bit for Le Mans?
It certainly does. It's nice to win a race. It's lovely to win one at home, and all season we've been trying to win one. Now we've done it.
Having won once, they went on to do it again at the very next race at Nogaro in France, where they headed home teammates John Nielsen and Thomas Bichère, who thus clinched the world title with the last race in China on Sunday still to go. We'll report on how they got on over the bumps of Zhuhai later in the